Hi there, it's Melanie Slifka again with your IHP presentation on sleep. I'm a functional medicine practitioner and a nutritionist. I'm hoping that over the next 30 minutes or so, I can help you out with some questions you have on sleep and give you some really wide-ranging information that will help you and your family and anyone you know get better sleep, thrive from that sleep, or correct some sleep problems that you have. Okay, let's move on. This child looks very tired, right? Hopefully, we're all that tired when we go to bed, and there's one way in order to do that, and that way is, to exhaust all resources. So, in order to get great sleep, I love to talk about making sure we get that 45 minutes of exercise every day. That is the key element to my sleep. I sleep really well. I always have, no matter what, if stress or trauma. I'm a sleeper. And I think one of the reasons is because I always get out and get at least 45 minutes of exercise every day of some sort. Even as a child, I was that kid running around with Kool-Aid on her face. I'm getting all the exercise a kid could possibly get. So that's what it looks like when you're exhausted, right? And you have no more energy left to perform your bodily functions, and you must rest. Okay, everybody. So let's talk about what we're going to focus on today. So, phases of sleep. What is sleep? What does it mean? What happens over the course of the night? I'm going to give you some information on that. And then we're going to talk about the physiology of deep sleep and the physiology of REM or REM sleep. Okay, rapid eye movement. That's your dreaming state. Next, we'll talk about sleep in your diet, what that looks like. And then we'll move on to lack of sleep and the vicious cycle, what that turns into and what that can be, and what that can be causing you physiologically and emotionally and mentally when you're not getting enough sleep. Next, to move further into that subject, we're going to talk about cortisol, ghrelin, and stress, and melatonin. All of these things are affected in your sleep cycle, whether for the good or the contrary. And last but not least, how can you get better sleep? So let's move into our next slide. Okay, guys, phases of sleep. You know what? I'm going to pause and restart this. I'm going to go back. Okay. And give it 10 seconds so I know where to cut this, and then we'll start again. Hi, everybody. I'm Melanie Slifka, functional medicine practitioner and nutritionist, and I'm here with the IHP session on sleep today. To me, this is the most important session that I can present to you. It has the most important information for your health. Yes, you heard me say it. I am a nutritionist, and I will tell you time and time again, sleep is the number one important aspect of your life for your health. Number one. Okay. Very serious. This is a very serious topic for me. I think it's a very serious topic for humans in general right now. There's a lot of things working against our sleep. And throughout the next 30 or 40 minutes, we're going to talk about that. Okay, so today we're going to talk about phases of sleep. And then those include the physiology of our deep sleep, what happens during deep sleep, what happens to you, and what happens to your body, and how we can utilize our deep sleep phase in order to create better health, the physiology of our REM sleep as well. And then we'll move into sleep, diet, lack of sleep, and the vicious cycle of what that looks like. And that also has to do with cortisol and some of these hormones, ghrelin and stress and melatonin. Okay, so we're going to get into the hormonal response and how that works for or against you when you are or you are not getting enough sleep. And last, how to get better sleep. All right. So some of you may know this, but I'm going to briefly go through this for you and for anyone who doesn't. We have 4 phases of sleep as well as a non-REM sleep cycle. So really 5, but we're going to call it 4 and REM sleep. So 1 through 2 sleep cycle is your light sleep. It's when you can hear things, you're got light cognition, you can easily be awoken, You're breathing and you can feel sensations. Your breathing is still moderate, and it's slowly progressing from the 1 and the 2. The 2 is lighter yet. And then we move into 3 and 4. 3 and 4 is of deep sleep. We don't have physical cognition. We aren't aware of things that are happening around us. And we enter our delta sleep cycle. Our breath becomes very light. Our body is doing very, very little work. Our muscles are, I should say. Internally, our body's actually doing quite a bit of work. We're going to get into that in a moment. And then the last cycle is our REM sleep, and this is called our dreaming state. Breath, heart rate, muscular tone all increase during this phase of sleep. So if you imagine you're dreaming and your body's moving, or if you have a partner or a child, when you watch them sleep, you can see them moving and they may talk in their sleep. This is all REM sleep. And those are your 5 cycles and phases of sleep in a night. Furthermore, I'm going to go on about this a little bit because it's really important to know that these phases of sleep happen maybe 3, 4, 5 times a night. Yes, you heard me right. So you'll start at phase 1 and 2, and then you'll go into 3, 4, and you'll go into REM. You'll do that whole phase like a wave, right? Maybe 3 or 4 times a night if you're getting enough sleep. The first half of the night is predominantly focused on stages 3 and 4 of sleep, so your deep sleep. So you may be lightly sleeping, and then you go into that deep sleep that lasts quite a long time, maybe 60, 90 minutes. That may happen 2, maybe 3 times a night, but mostly probably twice you'll enter about, let's say, a 3 or 4 hours of a deep sleep cycle. And that is essential to know, because if you lack that time in that sleep cycle, things happen that we'll get into in a little bit. And then you enter REM sleep, and that also is about a 60 to 90 minute window. Okay. And as you get further into the night and into the morning, your REM section of sleep becomes the predominant phase of sleep. So the deep sleep becomes less. You're more easily awoken. So if you're one of those people who wakes up for 2 or 3 in the morning, okay, you're in that's the second half of your sleep cycle. If you were to go to bed at 9, right, circadian rhythm, it gets dark. So you're at 2 or 3 in the morning, you're waking up there. That's because you're predominantly in that REM sleep, okay? And you can be more easily awoken during that. You can even wake yourself up. Sleep apnea, things like that can happen during that phase. So that REM sleep is also very important to our physiology, and we'll get into that in just a moment. So throughout the night, we're going through waves of these sleep patterns. Okay, let's talk about deep sleep. So, like I said, it happens several times over the course of the night, and you progress through all 5 throughout the night. And the first time you enter deep sleep is very important. So, if you work late, or you go to bed late, or if you're on your computer or your phone late, this stage can be affected. Night workers, okay, bartenders, people who are just night owls who stay up till 1 in the morning, they are actually missing a huge chunk of the deep sleep cycle. And this cannot be converted back. You cannot go to bed at 1 and recover that deep sleep cycle, because we have to remember that our circadian rhythm relies on the light of the earth. So as soon as the light comes up, we snap back out. And as the light starts to grow in your room or where you're at, you are going to lose out on those hours. So really important, if you're a night worker, to get to bed as quickly as possible and try to get as much of that deep sleep cycle as you can. Okay. So this cycle is where your body repairs itself. And that's why it's so important. Okay. A lot of people in the fitness industry say that if you don't get enough deep sleep cycle, you probably don't want to work out the next day, because your body hasn't had the ability to fully restore itself over the course of that night. Nighttime is the time where our body restores, our mind restores, our glycogen and the sugar and our muscles restore. Our hormones are built, okay? We're repairing everything in our body that's been broken down. Some people say that if we slept according to our circadian rhythm every single night, we'd have very slow aging. And so, interesting enough, ask one of your really youthful looking friends, how do you sleep? And I bet you they're going to tell you they sleep pretty well. Okay. So, if you don't get enough sleep and you go to lift weights, then you're adding, insult to injury for the most part, right? Because your body hasn't fully repaired from the trauma of the day. So what happens then? Okay. Also, waste products aren't able to be deposited into your urine or your sweat or your breath during your sleep. So that's also, you know how you wake up in the middle of the night and you have to go to the bathroom? That is the elimination process. So during the night, your body pulls all the toxins out, puts it in your urine, puts it in your feces, sweats it out, you breathe it out, right? All your body is doing at night is repairing itself, and that includes getting rid of toxins. And this happens during the deep sleep cycle, where you're literally, have the least amount of physical function possible. Okay. And then I mentioned the hormones are created during deep sleep. Your REM sleep, equally as important. A lot of people don't know this. I mean, a lot of people know about the hormones and that our body repairs at night, muscles repair and whatnot, but they don't know the importance of REM sleep. And this I didn't know myself until several years ago. And it's astounding what happens during this cycle of sleep. And I think it's so important to our level of stress in our life. So if you're waking up early in the morning at 2 or 3, you're not able to go back to sleep, this would be the part of the night that you're missing. And this is essential that you try to regain this, because what happens during the sleep cycle is that your brain emotionally categorizes events and you learn. So if you had an argument with your spouse, say, in the prior day, and you go to sleep and you miss out on this cycle, then you may wake up feeling, this similar as you did the night before, because your body wasn't able, your brain wasn't able to compartmentalize that argument and say, I had that argument because whatever reason, and put it into that box. And that's what our brain does at night. It takes these little tidbits of information, takes what we learned throughout the day, and it goes, you go there, you go there, you go there, you go there. I'm going to organize you so that I wake up tomorrow morning and I have a different perspective. And that's where the phrase sleep on it comes from, right? It makes sense because you always have a different perspective in the morning when your brain is able to take the information it gathered through the day and emotionally categorize it. So I hope that that makes sense to a lot of you, and I hope that you can see the importance of this level of sleep. So you're processing trauma, you're compartmentalizing thoughts, and your brain is learning at night. There's been studies done where people learn a language. They learn five sentences of a language, and then they test them at the end of the day, and they tend to remember like 10%. And then they test them in the morning and they end up remembering 50% of what they learned. So it just shows you the power of this cycle of sleep, of course, with the REM sleep. Moving on, sleep and diet. So lack of sleep creates a stress response. A stress response can create a lack of sleep. These are really important things to understand, because a stress response is really hard on your diet. It's really hard on your gut, which we're going to get to in a few frames, but I'm going to quickly get through this one. Okay, so during a stress response, your body stores fat in case of the two main instinctual stressors of our being, and that's a predator or famine. So our bodies cannot differentiate between the stress of traffic, the stress of financial worries, the stress of your spouse, stress of your children, and a predator. This is very important to know, because we are going to react our body as if we're being attacked. And this will make sense in the slides to come. But it's very important to know that stress is stress no matter where it's coming from. Okay. Hormones will not probably be converted due to a stress response, leaving higher levels of cortisol and even unprocessed estrogen. During your sleep cycle, estrogen gets turned into testosterone. And if you're not getting enough sleep, that first deep sleep cycle, then you may not be converting your estrogen into testosterone readily enough, and that's got a lot of complications. So stress response will cause higher levels of ghrelin to form and making us feel hungry all the time. So that's really important too. So I want to explain that just a little bit. So in the morning, if you're stressed out, when you wake up, you're hungry. And that's because your body's stressed, one of the two, right? So it's like, am I starving? Oh, I'm just going to get hungry. I'm going to send off my ghrelin response right? And I'm going to try to get myself some food. So that goes to my brain. That hormone goes to my brain, and brain says you're hungry, even if you are not. That happens for people who don't get enough sleep and have high levels of stress, causing the lack of sleep, right? Causing your diet to falter. So if you wonder why you're not losing weight and you're a highly stressed person, I promise you that's the reason. That first we have to knock out the stress. We have to knock out the stress. We have to figure out some solutions for the stress. Then we have to attack the sleep, right? And then the diet's third. And this is coming from a nutritionist. So, and that is how I would treat all my clients in my functional medicine practice. Okay. More body fat has its own hormonal response, and that makes cravings and hunger even harder to combat. Okay. So here you are, you can't sleep, right? You're hungry because you wake up, so you eat. That's causing stress, right? And then because it's causing stress, because you're getting fat, you're getting fatter or getting obese. And then your fat cells are creating a hormonal response in perpetuation of this cycle. So moving on to my next frame, lack of sleep and the vicious cycle. I hope you guys are seeing the big picture now about how important sleep is, okay? And how important stress and relieving stress is. Good. Okay, so those that work night shifts have a higher rate of cancer. Bottom line, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Unfortunately, this is the case. Pilots, first responders, right? Doctors, they all have a higher rate of cancer because they're missing out on, one of two or both sleep cycles. And you just can't get sleep back. Research says that you just can't nap it out, right? If you miss sleep, you miss sleep, and your body farther down, we'll talk about lack of sleep can be mentally debilitating to the point of being legally drunk after 18 hours of sleep deprivation. Even a night's sleep will have cognitive function problems for you to operate or do any kind of motor skills. So imagine, right? Doctors that are overworked, police officers are overworked, having emotional response, right? Having stress, having depression on top of that, having relational problems. I know this is a lot, and I know it sounds really negative, and I don't want it to be that way, but I just want to really give everyone a clear picture of what you're up against if you're missing sleep and you're under a lot of stress. We have got to work out some measures in order to help you get past that situation. And there's a lot of helpful information out there, which I'm going to share with you in a moment. Okay, and also those who work night shift, higher rate of divorce. Like I said, relationships suffer because our brain is wired to be defensive, and if we're stressed, that is our our response, our instinctual response is to be defensive against a predator. Even though your husband or wife is not a predator, we become defensive, and that ruins relationships. Okay, sleep depth makes us go fight or flight response. That creates stress. So if you're not sleeping for some reason, okay, here's a good one. So you don't have to be stressed and that results in not sleeping. You could also be like highly caffeinated, right? Or doing things before bed that cause you not to sleep. Like, wine, for instance, has a lot of sugar, high levels of sugar before bed, caffeine, things like that. Drugs can help make it so that you don't sleep. So there's also other things that you can control more readily that can help you sleep. So imagine those things too. Sleep's the number one, guys. Okay. And then finally, sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system. So that's once again, that's that fight or flight response, right? The sympathetic nervous system is all those things that are firing all the time, making us move, making us do everything we need to do, making us react and in action. And then our parasympathetic nervous system is all of those things, their breath, things that we don't even know our body's doing, and our calming mechanisms, right? So we always want to be paying attention to the balance between the two of those things in our lives. Okay, let's get into hormones. And I know you guys have heard these before, or most of you have, and if you haven't, I find this to be the most fascinating part, because what this does for my clients and for hopefully you out there listening, it takes a bit of the responsibility and a bit of the stress and the self-deprecation out of dieting and your inability to get better sleep or diet or lose weight or become healthier. Are these two hormones, as well as melatonin on the next slide. This is a physiological response. Okay, so if you've gotten to the point where your cortisol and your ghrelin and your melatonin are dysregulated, you've got a fight on your hands, and this is internal. So the best willpower in the world is going to be tested greatly and more great as you move down the obesity path line, or the dysfunctional path line. All these things work together to work against you, unfortunately, once you get to that point. Once you get to the point of type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, these things all go hand in hand together. So let me explain what they are and how we can help to suppress some of these things. So cortisol is a glucocorticoid hormone, regulates your metabolism, suppresses inflammation. Cortisone, right? Think of cortisone, not cortisol. Think of cortisone that you put on, or you get a cortisone shot in a joint, right? Because it's inflamed and it feels better for a few days, right? Cortisol also regulates sleep cycle. So what happens when your cortisol is dysregulated and you're constantly in that? So we create cortisol as a fight or a flight in response, a stress hormone. They call it our stress hormone. And it will spike. It'll become elevated from all levels of stress, everybody. Okay? If you have a trauma, you get hit by a car, cortisol, right? Adrenaline, they both spike immediately. Okay. And if you have like a fight, cortisol spikes. That's, sort of like that long sustaining stress, right? It's kind of dysfunction in your family or something, right? So any kind of stress is going to spike your cortisol, and it's meant as a stress response because it reverses, the inflammatory process. So it's an anti-inflammatory cortisol, right? And it regulates your metabolism so that, cortisol is going to fuel on sugar. Think about it. If you're under stress, your body's like fight or flight, fight. I need to get the sugar immediately. So if you have a low grade, high cortisol level, what's your body doing? It's constantly looking for sugar. Okay. So what happens then when your body's constantly looking for sugar? So your body's constantly hungry. You're also creating that ghrelin response, right? So that's triggered also by any kind of fat cells that are producing other hormones, right, to perpetuate that cycle. So cortisol often works against you when it's in a constantly elevated state, and it starts to be inflammatory, starts to work in reverse, and it starts to weaken your immune system after a while. So what is supposed to be helpful becomes the problem, right? For many people, cortisol is the problem, okay? And that's because of our stress, period. So in order to regulate your cortisol, you have to regulate your stress. Good. People with raised cortisol levels have high blood sugar because, right, it's looking for sugar. Those glucocorticoid receptors are looking for sugar because you're fighting all the time. My body thinks it's fighting. And it's also correlated with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, right? That makes sense. So people in studies with high cortisol have been shown to eat more, metabolize less, right? Because you want more food, you need more fat, you need more sugar. They actually crave, the studies that I'm citing here crave fat and sugar in particular, and simple carbs, which is your sugars, your high sugary foods. Excuse me. And this study also says that our metabolism works less when that happens because we're storing. Because, right, our two predators, famine and a predator, are creating stress responses. So our body's like, okay, there's a predator and I'm going to store this. Plus, I can't, when you're under a stress response, most of your organs shut down. You're not creating hormones. You're not processing food. You're not digesting food. Your body's only stressed. It has to fight the predator, right? So these other functions of our body shut down. So our metabolism actually slows down during high cortisol spikes or during high stress response. Okay, so ghrelin is known as our hunger hormone. Grab a sip of water real quick. Talking a lot. Okay, and it is predominantly produced in our belly and our GI tract. It tells your brain you're hungry, and it can be very powerful. And during dieting, it is all about anti-starvation mode. So if your belly doesn't have enough food, that ghrelin response kicks in automatically and says, eat. You need to eat, you need to eat, you need to eat. Your body's being stressed. That's why dieting is such a tricky matter. And that's why, like, of old, we suggest as nutritionists and dietitians that you only lose like 1 to 2 pounds a week, because otherwise you're fighting against this hormone and it's very powerful. Think of it as like a gremlin, a ghrelin, right? It's like, I'm in a food. Another way to fight the ghrelin response, I've got a couple things down here, is a high protein diet, right? Because, so what you want to do is you want to have like a carb on the front end, maybe like a carrot or an apple or something first, so your ghrelin subsides. It goes, oh, okay, good. Thank you for the sugar. By the way, all my glucocorticoid receptors needed that, so thank you. So you kind of chill out the body, and the body goes, okay, I got what I needed, but in a healthy way, right? Because that's a complex carb, right? Our fruits, they've got fiber to them, so they take more to digest, and they also detoxify your system. So something like that on the front end, you're going with like an apple, and then you want to give your body protein, because now that's going to sit in your stomach for the long term. It's going to take longer to digest, right? And in your GI. And so this will help mitigate the ghrelin response because there's food there. So if you think about this in terms of like if you just ate a croissant, right? So that's immediately gone. I mean, some of the fat remains, but that fat, it can be counterintuitive at this situation, and you're left with something that's fat's not going to build into your muscle or repair anything for you, right? Repair some of your membranes, but we actually don't even need that additional fat for our membranes. We build that in our own bodies ourselves. So really, you want to give yourself a little bit of a carb, a healthy carb, a complex carb, and then you want to do a little bit of protein in order to subside some of these responses. Okay. Sleep also helps with the ghrelin response. Like I said, you wake up, your body's in a state of famine. Am I famished? I'm gonna eat. Okay. So better sleep, de-stress, and exercise, all related to helping you with these hormonal responses. If you would like to test and see what your cortisol level is, if you feel that you may be one of these people who's has a high cortisol level that's kind of driving your lack of nutritional control or weight loss, then you can do a urine or a spit test in order to find out what your cortisol level looks like. It's hard to test, just so you know, because your cortisol level goes in conjunction up and down with your circadian rhythm, and this is really important. So you'd have to test several times during the day. That's how they do this test, and then over several days in order to see what that up and down looks like. So obviously we want a big kind of up and down. At night, what we want to happen is we want our melatonin to spike, because the nighttime, when I'm gonna get to that slide next, actually I'll go there now. Let's do it. So melatonin's power and antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, works directly with our immune system, and it's another hormone. So melatonin also signals our sex hormone production during sleep, deep sleep, I should say, right? So during that deep sleep mode, like I said, our hormones get produced. Estrogen gets converted to testosterone during that time. Really important function. So melatonin is one of the signals for that. We produce melatonin internally from our pineal gland from darkness. That is why we produce melatonin. So blue lights, computers, televisions, anything that's producing blue light after the sun has gone down is messing with your melatonin production, period. Okay, really great reason to get blue blocker shades or a blue blocker on your screens and whatnot, so that you can help your body continue to produce melatonin, because it's so important for so many different reasons, not just sleep. And the research is out. I mean, it's a highly researched property right now. So keep your eye on melatonin if you're someone who's into checking out new research. So like I said, light, any kind of light dysregulation ruins your melatonin production. Okay, so you're seeking melatonin, you're seeking about 1 to 5 milligrams in the evening if you want to help. This only helps with you entering the sleep cycle. So if you take melatonin and you have trouble waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, that is not going to help you. only going to help you get to bed. If you're the person who can't fall asleep at night, this is what you would like to take. And then, there's controversy around that. I've heard back and forth for years about, like, if you're giving your body melatonin, then it's not going to produce its own, and all of these stories, which have some validity in some studies. Everything does. So I never like to use anything exogenously if I don't have to. Even like magnesium lately, I've learned is, I'd rather just get it from my food if I can. If I'm feeling like I've done more fitness than I probably should have, then I will take some supplements because I know my body's really burnt a lot of energy off and needs help. But other than that, be wary of any kind of supplement is my recommendation. And then we have to remember works opposite of cortisol, right? So cortisol, and here's back to that last slide. Our melatonin at night is spiking because it's dark. Cortisol starts to wane. So melatonin's going up, cortisol is coming down. And then in the morning, melatonin's dropping off and cortisone's coming up. Okay? Cortisol wakes us up in the morning. So that's why we get out of bed, because that starts to spike. If we have high cortisols all through, right? If your cortisol levels are dysregulated, like we talked about in the last frame, because of stress, then what happens is that sometimes we don't wake up, right? Those people who sleep all morning and stuff, unless it's a child or something, if it's an adult, they may have a cortisol problem. They may have a dysregulation there. They're not able to wake up out of that sleep because cortisol is not spiking, because it's dysregulated. And so many other things are following suit with that as well. So really important to know. I hope that helped. I hope some of this, technical stuff about our hormones can help you guys understand maybe where you're at or someone else. And if not, read back through these slides and hopefully they'll give you and your tribe some information. Okay, let's get to our last slide. We're 32 minutes in. Try to make it as short and sweet as possible. How do you get better sleep? Okay, go to bed early with the sun down. And this will create your own natural melatonin once again, right? And so you don't have to worry about the blue blockers and all that. Yeah, I know I'm dreaming. I know you guys are going to stay up till 10 o'clock or so. I do too. There's a lot of things to do in this world. And, sometimes that's really valuable time for our families. So you have to weigh out the good and the bad. Kids are at school all day, we're at work, we come home, we eat probably 5 or 6, and then we have a few hours to spend with our family, which is the reason we do everything, right? So really important to gauge what that looks like for you. Try to get your butt in bed by 9:30 if you can, and have lights out by 10 is my recommendation. If you're an early sleeper, great. That's even better. But this seems to work really well with your circadian rhythm. So 10 o'clock, right? We're looking for 8 hours. Not 10, by the way. I didn't put it in these slides, but oversleep is also can be counterintuitive to your physiology. That's a whole nother discussion, and it's you're not as lofty as this, so I didn't include it, but it is true. And I think that has to do with that whole cortisol problem. If you're sleeping too much, then your cortisol is not regulating itself enough, and so there's probably stress happening. And so that's probably why that becomes, unhealthy for you as well. Okay, back to this. Sleep in a dark place, right? Because any light that shows in, lamplight, your light from your phone sitting over here, cover that up. Street lights, anything, right? You don't want any of that seeping in order for you to get the best sleep possible. A cool place. So, I don't put a fan on me, but I have a fan in the room. I like air sort of circulating. I like to be nice and cool in my room, even in the summertime. So keep that room, 69, 70 degrees, or, maybe even 68 if you're good with that, and use a blanket. Sleep till the sun comes up, right? And try to get up with the sun if you can. Most of us do. We have to go to work. So sun gets up at 6:30. I get up about 6:37. Enjoy myself in bed. Enjoy those moments. And I've turned it into a ritual, which I'll get to on number 10. And then get a blue blocker for your devices if you have to use them after sundown. You have to work. We have to do what we have to do in this world. And some people do work night shifts, right? So if you need to stay up, of course, you don't want to put a blue blocker on your phone if you're doing the night shift, because then you'll get sleepy. You actually want to have the blue light keeping you awake until it's time. And then once you get about an hour or so out from going to bed, for those night worker people, put the blue blocker on your phone. Don't look at the TV or the other devices. darken your room and take a little melatonin, right, to get yourself down if you need to. And so once again, melatonin, but make sure you talk to a doctor about dosage on melatonin. It is a bit controversial, so some people do have side effects. So make sure you talk to your physician. Children should only have about 1 milligram, if that. And there's also not a lot of research on children and melatonin. So use your judgment and talk to your doctor. You can use magnesium, like I said earlier. I use magnesium. Milk with magnesium. Remember that kind of helps you sleep. It's got a nice sort of what am I looking for? Sleepy, relaxant. It's a relaxant for your system, as well as hops, not the beer hops. I know you guys are thinking that, but I do think that beer sometimes, if it's not too sugary, if it's particularly hoppy, can help with sleep. But hops in a tincture form is one of the highly tested forms of sleep aid that helps when you wake up at 2:30, 3 in the morning. Having a tincture of hops and a little bit of water at your bedside, take a quick sip of if you happen to wake up, has been shown in research to help you get to bed, back to sleep at that point of your sleep phase. So something to consider if that's what you're dealing with. Valerian root is also really great, and all kinds of other herbal sleep, your chamomile and whatnot. Teas are also great relaxants. So remove the caffeine from your diet afternoon and any high sugar foods as well. So if you're like, I've got a sweet tooth and you want to have your ice cream, make sure you're doing that like 6 or 7. You don't want that up at, you want to give yourself a few hour leeway on any of those sweets before bed. And clear your mind with a journal. I think this one is the most important for me, is that, people keep themselves awake because of the stress of their lives, all the thoughts. And then, like I said, and they don't get that REM sleep, and they carry all those thoughts and all those patterns into the next day, unresolved mentally. And so my work with Unbeatable Mind has pointed me in the direction of doing a journal, an evening ritual every night where I sit down and I recapitulate my day. And what that looks like is I take a journal and I write down, or even you could just lie in bed and think about the points of your day. Start from the beginning and go, where was it excellent and where do I need to do some more work? I had road rage today, for instance. So a road rage I love road rage because it's a sign that, we're putting Band-Aids on other parts of our lives. And that when we get out in society with a bunch of people we don't know, and everyone's heading the same direction, you start to have anger issues. It's not really the road you're on. It's not really that exact circumstance. There's other things that are leading up to that discontent. So if you're experiencing road rage, maybe you want to journal about it and say, okay, why do I need to get to work so fast? What have I done to my life so that I need to get from A to B before all these other people that makes them obsolete? And so really just digging into your feelings in your day. I got upset at my child. Why did I get upset at my child? Okay, well, because of this. Okay, how could I have done that better? And so you recapitulate all these little moments in your life, and then you set a little plan for the next day. This is what I want to do. These are my goals for the next day. And then your mind is clear, right? And you're also working in the positive when you go to bed. So hopefully that eliminate maybe even some nightmares or stress dreams. Exercise every day, guys. 45 minutes of walking is a minimum. You've got to get out and move your body. Your body's got to be used. Use it or lose it, right? Your muscles are so important. Building a muscle mass is so important. Like eating protein and building muscle mass together are about the most important things metabolically that I could recommend to you. So your muscle is the organ of longevity, and it's when you fatigue that muscle, right? Your body's got something to do overnight. So it falls asleep faster. It's got to go in and repair. It's got a job to do overnight. If you're not, working out or getting in your exercise, you're leaving that whole part of your system, underutilized. So imagine it that way. Give your body something to do at night while it's repairing. And then last but not least, like I just said, create a ritual around your sleep. Don't look at it like, I gotta go to sleep, I better go to sleep. Mel said, go to sleep. You have to think about it of your sanctuary. So create your room as your sanctuary. I try not to visit my bedroom till I go to bed. Let's put it that way. I don't spend any time in there. It is solely the room where I go and I lie down, and my bed's super comfy. I have my favorite sheets. and my blanket and all my pillows. And it's like a glorious time when I get to go lay my head down to rest in that place and sleep all night. A little fan going, whatever it is for you, create your sanctuary in your bedroom for you. And that is all I have for you today on sleep. I hope that this has been helpful. I wish you all a great sleep, and I wish you all great health. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, melanieslifka@gmail.com. And I'm happy to help out in any way I can. So for all of you out there listening, have yourselves a wonderful day, and we'll see you back soon.